The main road south from Huddersfield meanders through the West Yorkshire countryside towards Manchester, and about halfway along, nestled in the Pennine Hills, you'll find the charming small town of Holmfirth. Holmfirth is a busy but largely unspoilt town, surrounded by breathtaking scenery and having a diverse history. It's a popular destination for both walkers and tourists, attracted by the interesting shops and charming stone-built houses. Well into the 20th century, many people in the area made their living in the textile industry, with the River Holme running through the town, driving the water wheels that powered the factories. While still having ties with the textile industry today, much of Holmfirth's prosperity now comes from tourism, arguably driven by the success of the Last of the Summer Wine television series, which used Holmfirth and the surrounding area as a backdrop. But the town also has other film, television and sporting links to interest the many visitors. Local TV programme presenters Harry Gratian and Amy Garcia stopped off here in 2016. They were undertaking an epic 250-mile tandem ride in aid of children in need along the route of the Tour de Yorkshire. Despite Harry suffering from severe back pain, the Look North duo chatted and joked with the crowd before continuing their journey. Popular media has always seemed to be part of the town's development. It was the home of Bamforth and Company Limited. Perhaps better known for their cheeky seaside postcards, the Bamforth Company were pioneers of filmmaking, and during the early 1900s produced a significant number of fiction and documentary subjects. The Picturedrome Cinema, built in 1912, would undoubtedly have shown their work. Today it hosts exhibitions, pop concerts and film events. But Holmfirth is inevitably linked to the Last of the Summer Wine, and most of the outside locations used in the series are instantly recognisable. One of the most frequently used was Sid's Cafe, seen in virtually every episode. Interestingly, it wasn't actually a cafe when the series began. It was a paint storeroom for the hardware shop next door, but once redressed to suit the filming, the owners kept it that way. This behind-the-scenes footage was taken by Colin Frost, who bought and ran the cafe. He now operates the Summer Wine Magic Tours. The cafe interior was rarely used for filming because it's very, very small. It was recreated as a studio set back in London, and the rear kitchen and serving hatch, through which Ivy bellowed abuse at her husband and customers alike, doesn't exist in the real establishment. The eating area looks much the same, and while you can get a nice cup of tea, the counter is foreshortened, and the serving hatch and the door are fake, fastened to what is actually the outside wall. They were put there to look right when glimpsed on film from the outside.
When you watch an episode of The Last of the Summer Wine, the natural assumption is that it was all filmed here in Holmfirth because everywhere seems to be just around the corner from everywhere else. But in reality, it was filmed in lots of different locations, and some of them quite a way away. For example, the formidable Aunt Edie and her henpecked husband Wesley, he of the exploding shed, didn't live anywhere near Holmfirth. To visit them, we have to take a little trip along the main road towards a little village called Holmbridge. So this house is where Auntie Edie and Wesley lived. Number 4, Dam Head. Just as a point of interest, most of the houses around here have got these unexpected top floors with the very large windows. The reason for those was that they were all employed as home-based weavers in the days before electricity, and so they needed the windows to get the most daylight to work by.
So this is where Edie and Wesley lived. Only the outside of the house was ever filmed, rather like the cafe. The interiors were always studio sets, so that when you see Aunt Edie having her famous coffee mornings with all the ladies, that's in the studio set. But of course, there's plenty of room here for the camera crew to film the outside, particularly when Edie used to take her terrified passengers out on one of her kamikaze trips in the Triumph Herald. Anyway, one last thing before we go. Where was Wesley's exploding shed? Well, exactly where you'd expect it to be, just up the path in front of the house. Let's go and have a look. Well, the view is much the same, that hasn't changed, but the shed, I'm afraid, is no more. The reason, of course, is because it was just a prop. It was brought up here by the film crew at the start of every shoot, assembled, bits and pieces piled up round it, and then they brought in the cast and the crew, and they shot everything that they needed for the entire series, and then they'd dismantle it, take it back into storage. And where did it stand? Well, right here. Now I'm afraid it's just a tarmacked area where the neighbours park their cars.
Holmbridge occasionally stood in for the main Holmfirth location, and many of the lanes and countryside scenes in the series were shot in the nearby hills above here. The main characters often sat on roadside benches like this one during their wanderings, and set the world to rights while looking out at the rolling hills.
The bench has been replaced over the years, but the scenery hasn't changed much, except that there's now a hilltop restaurant and a vineyard. It's ironic, isn't it, that here on the fields where Compo, Clegg and Foggy used to walk and sometimes roll down, they're making, wait for it, summer wine.
Another popular character was the fearsome Auntie Wainwright, who ran the second-hand shop and shamelessly fleeced all and sundry. So was that in Holmfirth? Nope. To find Auntie Wainwright's, you really need to get your hiking boots on and head out, way across country. So here we are in the small town of Marsden, and Auntie Wainwright's shop is up there at the top of Oliver Lane. But where is it actually? Well, the answer is more TV magic. It took a large van and several hefty blokes to transport the fake frontage of the shop to here and fix it onto the front of this ordinary house. Again, when the cast move inside the shop, it's a studio-created interior some 200 miles away. The magic of editing, creating a perfect transition from one to the other. But why go to all this trouble and continually transport cast and crew from miles away? I've no idea, but that's showbiz, I suppose. The surrounding countryside of Marsden also provided many of the quaint bridges that Compo fell off with disturbing regularity. But let's get back to Holmfirth and finally visit perhaps the most iconic of the series locations. Number 28 Huttersfield Road might sound unremarkable, but it is arguably one of the most recognisable places in comedy TV history, because it's the home of bossy battle axe Nora Batty. It was here on the steps and terrace that many a confrontation took place between Nora and her scruffy neighbour Compo, whose amorous advances were usually rewarded with a swipe from her sweeping brush. There are actually 3 levels here: Nora's house, then down the steps to where Compo lived, and then down again to the access lane. This was a difficult location in which to film, so the crew employed a swivelling platform to mount the camera, seen here in more of Colin Frost's behind-the-scenes footage. The house is now a protected building, renovated as self-catering accommodation. As with the other locations, this is a public area with easy access for tourists, which must be a nuisance for the locals sometimes. Next door there's a themed tea shop and a memorabilia exhibition. Time, like the river home, flows endlessly through the town, and the cast of the series inevitably changed over the 30 years that it ran. But here is probably a good place to say farewell to those beloved characters who wandered through Holmfirth and beyond in search of the last of the summer wine.